Hello everyone, in this video we will learn how to deploy .NET Web application from a local Git repository using Azure CLI. For implementing the steps discussed in the video, you will need to have the following prerequisites in place: Azure subscription, Azure CLI, .NET CLI, and Git. You don't need to be an expert in any of the above mentioned tools. Basic knowledge will be good enough. To get up to speed with the prerequisites, please refer to the playlist that I have mentioned in the description of the video. Let's have a look at the steps that we will follow to complete the task. First, we will create a web application using .NET CLI. We will initialize a local Git, add and commit code. We will create a resource group. We will create an app service plan in the resource group. We will create a deployment user for deploying code to the web application. We will create the web application and then we will check the site. We will push the code to the remote repository. After that, we will change the code and again push it to the remote repository. Let's start executing the steps that we just discussed. I will be creating a bash script with all the steps required to deploy from local Git to an app service. If you want, you can also execute the steps one by one on the command line without using bash script. Let's get started. In this screen, you can see the list of steps we need to implement. Let's start writing command for each of the steps. We will create a new web application using the .NET new command. Let's do it. This command will create the .NET Core web application in a folder with the name Mr. RK Web App. Let's initialize the local Git repository. We'll just switch to the directory which was created in the .NET new command. This will initialize a local Git repository to add all the files that were generated as part of the .NET new command. To commit all the code to the local Git repository, we will use git commit command. Now we have all the code in the local Git repository. To create a resource group, we will need a resource group name and a location. Resource group name. I'm going to go with West US. Now we will use azure group create command for creation of the resource group. And the option to enter the resource group name. And then we will have an L option to enter the location. And then we'll use have no option to enter the output format. This is how we'll create the resource group. To create an app service plan, we will need a app service plan name. This plan name. Okay. And we will use it as app service plan create. For creation of the application, we will have to enter the resource group name, and then we will have to enter the name of the app service plan itself, and then we will have to define the tier. I'm going for the free tier. I'm going to say that I need a Linux infrastructure, and then the output format has to be tabular format. For deploying to a web application, we will need deployment credentials. So let's create that. I will define two variables: deployment user name, deployment user, okay, password 1234. Now we will use azure web app deployment user set command to set the deployment. We will use F1 username option to enter the deployment username, and then we will use password option to enter the deployment user. Good. And I am saying the output of this command has to be tabular. Sorry, table. So For creating a web application, we need to define the runtime. That is the runtime on which the application will run. For us, it will be .NET. Sorry. And for us, it will be .NET Core 3.1. Then we will use is web app create command. We will have to use g option to mention the resource group that we are going to use. Then and plan to enter the app series that we are going to use. And then have a name option to enter the web application name itself. And then have a runtime option to enter the runtime. And then since we are deploying from local git, deployment happen local happen git option, and then I'm saying that output has to be tabular format. After the web application is created, there is a remote repository which is also created. So the URL for the remote repository will be something like this. Now we need to add a reference to this particular remote repository. Add Azure is the name of the reference, and then is the repository URL. Okay, now to push the code in from the local git repository to this remote repository, we'll use command git push the remote repository reference and then the local branch name. We need to fix a small mistake that we have done while initializing local git repository. Fix it now. We need to be in application folder. Now that our script is ready, let's go ahead and execute the script. We need to enter the password for pushing code to the remote repository. Our deployment was successful. To test the deployment, we can use curl command cp slash. Our web application name was rk web app. Web. You can see here we are getting the response as hello world. What I will do is I'll go to the startup.cs file. I'm going to change this world here to Azure. I'm going to save it. If I check the status, you can see one of the file has changed. Already added. Okay, that's fine. What we'll do is run this command, hit add dot, and after that hit change message. I committed it to the local repository. Let's push repository. Okay. If it push Azure is the remote. Let's do this. You need to set the same. We'll ask the same password that we had set in the script. Okay. What we see is that data is getting pushed to the remote repository. Once the data is pushed, it will actually redeploy the application. What you're seeing right now is redeployment of the application. Now if I try to run the curl command, I should see the updated message. Alright, we need to run it once or twice. There you go. There we have the latest change.